They say you can tell when the storm's about to break, when the air feels too still, too heavy, like the world's holding its breath. That's how it felt the night everything fell apart. I stood at the head of our old oak dining table, the one I built with my own hands during the winter after Lily was born, and stared down at the polished surface. Every plate was in its place, every glass sparkling under the soft glow of the chandelier Samantha insisted we install last year. The house smelled like roast chicken and rosemary, a picture-perfect scene for a family dinner in Flagstaff, Arizona. But my gut told me something was wrong. And when you've spent years running into burning buildings, you learn to trust that gut. Caleb, honey, can you grab the wine? Samantha's voice floated in from the living room, sweet as honey, but with that edge like she was already 2 glasses in. Her laugh followed high and bright, too bright, like glass about to shatter. I moved to the kitchen, hands steady even as my stomach twisted. The bottle of Cabernet was already open, breathing on the counter. I poured a glass for Samantha, my hands rough and calloused from years of firefighting and woodworking. Stepping into the dining room, I caught the scene in full. Samantha perched on the couch like she was holding court, her blonde hair perfectly curled, eyes sparkling with that kind of light that draws people in. My brother Ethan leaned against the mantel beer, dangling from his fingers, wearing that smirk he always did when he thought nobody was watching. Jolene, Samantha's sister, was already deep into the wine, her face flushed and loud, filling the room with sharp-edged comments. And their mother Elaine sat stiff as a board on the edge of her seat, lips pursed tight, like she could hold back the judgment leaking from her eyes. "Here's to family," Samantha beamed as I handed her the wine. She touched my arm lightly, the way she always did when she wanted something. "Always taking care of us, aren't you, Caleb?" I didn't answer, just nodded and took my place at the table. My eyes drifted to Lily sleeping peacefully in her carrier by the window, her tiny fist curled like she was dreaming of holding the world. She had dark hair, dark eyes, no trace of my sandy blonde or Samantha's honey hues. The knot in my gut tightened, but I swallowed it down. I'd been doing that a lot lately. "Dinner's ready," I announced, voice steady. Everyone gathered around the table, forks clinking, conversation flowing like the wine. Samantha launched into her usual performance about her wellness coaching, business brand, partnerships, growing social media numbers, clients in Sedona, paying her to teach them how to manifest abundance. Elaine nodded, but you could tell she wasn't impressed. Jolene rolled her eyes and muttered, "Must be nice making money off telling people how to live their lives. At least I'm not slinging drinks for truckers and divorcees." Samantha shot back, her voice sharp as a blade. Jolene's grin turned sly. "Hey now, nothing wrong with honest work." Ethan's voice cut through low and slow, but there was something in his tone that made me glance at him. His eyes didn't meet mine. I sat quiet, cutting into my steak with precise strokes, letting them all jab and snipe. I'd learned long ago that words could be weapons and silence was sometimes the best armor. "Watch, listen, learn." Then Jolene struck, her voice like a whip crack. "Funny how genetics work out, huh?" She tilted her glass toward Lily's carrier. "Too bad she doesn't look a thing like you, Caleb." The words hit the table like a grenade. Samantha froze mid-bite. Ethan's beer paused halfway to his lips. Elaine sucked in a sharp breath. The room went still, like the whole world had tilted on its axis. Samantha let out a high, nervous laugh. "Jolene, you're drunk." "Maybe I am," Jolene slurred, "but I'm not wrong. Look at her. Dark hair, dark eyes. Not a trace of those baby blues you Whitakers are known for." Ethan's chair scraped against the floor. Samantha's face went pale, then flushed, then pale again, like she couldn't decide which emotion to fake first. I felt it, then something snap inside me. The man I used to be, the one who believed in family and loyalty and love, he cracked, splintered, like dry wood under pressure. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope. White, plain, harmless looking, but it might as well have been a stick of dynamite. "Since we're all in the mood for honesty," I said, my voice calm, too calm, "let's go ahead and open this." Samantha's eyes locked onto the envelope like it was a snake coiled to strike. Her hand shook as she reached for it, but I didn't let go until I saw the color drain completely from her face. "Go on," I told her softly. "Share with the family." The silence that followed was the kind that makes your ears ring, makes your heart pound so loud you wonder if everyone can hear it. And I didn't blink, didn't look away. Because this wasn't just about a baby or a marriage or even betrayal. This was about the moment the truth finally burned through the lies, and I was going to make damn sure everyone felt the heat. I remember the day Lily was born like it was yesterday, mostly because it was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and yet it felt like a slow-motion car crash from the start. Samantha lay in the hospital bed, hair sticking to her forehead, breathing hard but smiling like she just won a beauty pageant, not pushed a human into the world. The nurses buzzed around us like bees, checking vitals, adjusting monitors, talking in that calm, clipped tone they use when they want to seem in control of chaos. And then there was me standing there like a fool holding this tiny squirming bundle in my arms. Lily, my daughter, or so I thought. I remember looking at her, really looking and feeling that rush of love they tell you about in the parenting books. The surge that's supposed to fill you up and make you forget the pain, the doubts, the fears. But underneath that love, there was a flicker of something darker, something cold, something I didn't want to name. Lily's hair was dark, not just dark black like midnight oil. Her skin had an olive tone that didn't match my pale, sun-weathered face or Samantha's golden glow. Her eyes, when she opened them, were wide and brown, deep dark brown. Not a hint of blue, not a trace of my family's genetics that stretched back generations. I told myself it didn't matter. Babies change. Features shift. My mind was playing tricks on me because I was exhausted, because Samantha had been so distant during the pregnancy, because I was overthinking. That's what I kept saying over and over, like a prayer or a curse. But prayers don't quiet a gnawing gut feeling. They just help you ignore it long enough for it to grow into something worse. The cracks had started long before Lily arrived. Samantha's pregnancy had been different. She was distant, snappy, and constantly glued to her phone. She'd whisper in the kitchen late at night, claiming it was her sister calling about some relationship drama or a business partner in a different time zone. She'd go on long walks, disappear for hours with vague excuses: yoga classes, grocery runs, me time. When I'd asked about the expenses, random charges at fancy restaurants, we never went to hotel stays in town, gas station receipts from places she had no reason to be, Samantha had answers ready. Smooth, polished lies that sounded so reasonable I'd almost believe them. Almost. Pregnancy makes you paranoid, Caleb, she'd said once, laughing as she scrolled through her phone. You're overthinking everything. Just focus on the baby, okay? I tried. God knows I tried. I threw myself into building Lily's nursery. I hand-carved the crib from reclaimed pine, sanding it until it gleamed. I painted the walls a soft sage green, the color Samantha picked. I installed shelves, built a rocking chair, made mobiles from driftwood and sea glass. I worked my hands raw because working kept me from thinking, and thinking meant spiraling into that dark place where I started asking questions I didn't want the answers to. But the doubts crept in anyway. Like smoke under a door, they found the cracks. I remember one night about a month before Lily was born. Samantha had gone to bed early, complaining of a headache. I stayed up tinkering in the workshop. Around midnight, I came inside and heard her voice, soft, hushed, almost intimate. I crept down the hall and stopped outside the bathroom. The light was on, the door was cracked, and there she was sitting on the edge of the tub, phone pressed to her ear, voice low and urgent. I know, but it's almost over. Just be patient, she whispered. A pause, then a soft, breathy laugh that made my blood run cold. He doesn't suspect a thing. I stood there, heart pounding in my chest so loud I was sure she could hear it. I wanted to burst in demand, to know who she was talking to, but I didn't. I couldn't. I just backed away, went back to the workshop and stared at the wall for hours, trying to convince myself that I'd imagined that, but I hadn't. The night Lily was born, as I cradled her in my arms and kissed the top of her head, that same doubt clung to me like smoke from a fire. Samantha watched me with that practiced smile, but her eyes, they didn't match the joy in the room. They were calculating, watching, waiting. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, receipts, the late-night phone calls, the sudden trips, the lies. May 3rd, Samantha gone from 2:00 to 6:00 p.m., claimed she was shopping for baby clothes. No bags. May 15th, phone call at 11:47 p.m., 23 minutes long, in the bathroom. Claimed it was Jolene. May 22nd, 3:47 at the Copper Cactus fancy downtown place. Said it was a canceled client dinner. It added up piece by piece like the grain in a slab of walnut wood. When the varnish goes on, suddenly you can see the pattern. I didn't want to see it, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I did the one thing I never thought I'd do in my life. I ordered a DNA test, a simple kit mail-in, no fanfare, a swab from Lily's cheek while Samantha was at yoga. A few weeks of waiting that felt like years. And when the envelope arrived, I took it out to the workshop, shut the door, and sat there under the smell of varnish and sawdust as I opened it. 99.7% probability that I was not Lily's biological father. I sat there for an hour holding that paper, staring at the words, feeling something inside me die. Not love, because love had been bleeding out of me for months, slow and quiet like a wound I'd ignored for too long. What died that day was trust. And when trust dies, something darker takes its place. The thing about betrayal is it doesn't kill you but outright. It's not a bullet to the chest. It's a slow bleed, a drip, drip, drip that drains you until there's nothing left but a hollowed out version of the man you used to be. That's where I was the day I decided to stop bleeding and start sharpening knives. I sat in my workshop that morning, the Arizona sun streaming in through the high windows, casting long shadows over the wood-stained floor. My hands worked automatically, planing, sanding, fitting pieces together, but my mind wasn't on the table in front of me. It was on Samantha, and Ethan, and Lily. My family, or what was left of it. The DNA test sat on the workbench, folded neatly in its envelope, like a bomb waiting to go off. It wasn't just a piece of paper, it was proof that the life I thought I'd built was a lie. And now it was time to figure out what to do with that proof. That's when Tommy showed up. Tommy Reynolds had been my best friend since high school. We'd met in shop class, two stubborn kids who'd rather build a birdhouse than sit through algebra. He'd always been the guy you could count on, loyal, no nonsense, and the kind of friend who didn't just show up when you needed him, he showed up before you knew you needed him. He walked into the shop carrying two coffees from the corner bean, his ball cap pulled low, a grease stain on his jeans. "You look like hell," he said, setting the coffee down without waiting for me to say a word. "When's the last time you slept?" I didn't answer, just stared at the table, watching the sunlight catch the edges of the wood grain like fire on water. "Caleb," Tommy said, voice low and steady. "Talk to me." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Then I did what I hadn't done for weeks. I told him everything. The suspicions, the late-night calls, the lies, the day test. Ethan. Tommy listened, leaning back against the workbench, arms crossed. His face didn't change much, just a tightening around the eyes, a slight tick in his jaw. When I finished, he nodded once, like a man who'd been waiting for the punchline. "So what's the plan?" he asked. That's why I love Tommy. No empty platitudes. No. Are you sure, or maybe you're overreacting? Just straight to the point. The plan, I said, voice cold and even, is to destroy her. Legally, financially, publicly. Every lie, every manipulation documented, exposed, and held up for the world to see. Tommy whistled low. "Damn, Caleb, that's dark." "It's what she taught me," I said quietly. "I learned from the best." Tommy took a sip of his coffee. "You're going to need help. That's why I called Grace." Grace Sullivan was Tommy's cousin, a paralegal at a firm downtown. I'd met her a couple times over the years at cookouts and block parties, but we'd never been more than acquaintances. That was about to change. She showed up that evening right after sunset. Grace was sharp, petite glasses perched on her nose, dark hair in a no-nonsense bun, and a stare that could slice through steel. She walked into my shop like she owned the place, laptop under one arm, legal pad in the other. "Caleb Whitaker," she said, dropping into the chair across from me. "Tommy told me you're in a bit of a mess." "That's one way to put it," I said. "Good. I like messes. They're easier to clean up when you've got a strong paper trail." She opened her laptop and started typing. "Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out." So I did. The receipts, the texts, the phone calls, the hidden accounts I'd uncovered by accident, the $347 charge at the Copper Cactus, the hotel bills, the gas station stops in the next county over. The pattern of lies Samantha wove around my life like a spider web. Grace's fingers flew across the keyboard. "You've got a solid fraud case, maybe even grounds for a marital tort claim. Adultery's harder to prove without pictures, but the financial deception, oh yeah, that's a gold mine." Tommy sat nearby, arms crossed, watching it all unfold like a man witnessing a storm rolling in. He wasn't the type to say much, but I could feel the weight of his loyalty like a steady hand on my shoulder. Then Grace clicked something, her brows tightening. "Caleb, do you know a W. Whitaker?" My stomach dropped. "Ethan, my brother." Grace turned the laptop toward me. On the screen, a series of bank transfers, Samantha moving money into an account under Ethan's name. A lot of money. Thousands. Tens of thousands. I sat back in the air, leaving my lungs in a rush. I'd suspected. God, I'd suspected. But seeing it in black and white made it real in a way that burned worse than any fire I'd ever run into. Tommy muttered under his breath. Grace just kept typing, her face a mask of calm. "We'll need to gather more," she said. "Social media posts, texts, phone records. Build the case brick by brick. And Caleb," she looked up, her eyes sharp as a blade, "you'll need to keep playing dumb. Let her think you don't know. Let her keep lying." I nodded slowly, the decision settling in my bones like concrete. I can do that, Good Grace said, standing up and snapping her laptop shut. Let's make sure she never sees it coming. I watched her walk out of the shop, the scent of sawdust and varnish lingering in the air like smoke after a blaze. That night, as I sat alone at my workbench, staring at the growing pile of evidence, I realized something with perfect, brutal clarity. This wasn't just about saving myself. This was about justice, and Samantha had no idea what kind of man she'd taught me to become. The rusted spur sat on the edge of town like a dying animal, slumped and sagging, barely holding itself together. The sign above the door flickered weakly in the desert dusk, and the parking lot was half empty. Two trucks, a beat-up sedan, and my old work boots carrying me across the cracked asphalt. The place smelled like stale beer, burnt fryer grease, and lost dreams. I pushed open the door, and the weight of it felt heavier than it should have. Inside, the air buzzed with the low hum of a game on TV, the clink of pool balls, and the muted chatter of a few regulars. None of them looked up. They didn't need to. They knew me, Caleb Whitaker, the firefighter, the woodworker, the quiet one who kept to himself. Not the man who'd come here tonight. Ethan stood behind the bar, wiping a glass with a rag that looked dirtier than the glass itself. He looked up when I walked in, and I saw just a flicker, a flash of something in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or fear, or that deep sinking dread when you realize the lies you've been telling are about to catch up to you. "We're closed," he called out, voice flat, but he didn't stop wiping. His hands worked like they had their own minds, scrubbing a glass that didn't need it, like maybe if he scrubbed hard enough, he could erase what he'd done. I stepped up to the bar, planted both hands on the worn wood, and leaned in. Not here for a drink. The room seemed to go quieter, like the whole building was holding its breath. Ethan stared at me, glass frozen in mid-wipe. The silence between us stretched 41 years of brotherhood, of shared memories, of childhood baseball games and backyard campouts, and fighting over the last slice of pizza. All of it hanging there about to break. "You know why I'm here," I said, voice low. He didn't answer, just set the glass down carefully like it might shatter if he moved too fast. His eyes darted to the side to the pool table where two old-timers lined up shots pretending not to listen. Then back to me. "How long?" I asked, the words coming out cold and sharp, a blade slicing through the air. Ethan exhaled a breath that rattled. He looked older than he had a week ago, like the weight of his lies had finally started to crush him. His shoulders slumped and his voice came out hoarse. "Since before you married her." The punch landed, but I didn't flinch. I didn't give him the satisfaction. Inside, though, something twisted so hard it felt like my ribs cracked. "Before the wedding," I repeated, my voice flat. "You were already with her before we even said our vows." Ethan swallowed hard, nodding, looking anywhere but at me. The floor, the glass in his hand, the TV above the bar, playing a Diamondbacks game that no one was watching. I kept my voice calm, even surgical. "Is Lily yours?" The question hung there, heavy, awful, like the kind of thing you can't unsay once it's out. Ethan didn't answer, and he didn't need to. The way his shoulders tensed, the way his mouth tightened, the way he looked down in a way that told me everything I needed to know. I nodded slowly, the pieces snapping together in my mind. Lily's dark hair, her eyes, the way Samantha always seemed more comfortable around Ethan, like they shared some secret joke I was too stupid to understand. It all lined up now, clear as the Arizona sky on a cold winter night. "You took my daughter," I said quietly, the words tasting like ashes in my mouth. "You took my family, my trust, my life. And for what? A few stolen nights, a few extra dollars in your pocket." Ethan finally looked at me, his face pale and drawn, eyes rimmed red. He looked like a man circling the drain, and I felt no pity. "I didn't plan it like this, Caleb. It just happened." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "It just happened. You tripped and fell into my wife. You accidentally moved 40 grand into a secret account. You accidentally let her whisper in your ear while I was laid up in a hospital bed with a busted spine." Ethan's face crumpled, and he dropped his gaze again. His hands trembled as they fumbled for a bottle of whiskey, pouring a shot with a clink that sounded too loud in the stillness. "I thought you were done after the accident," he muttered, voice barely audible. "You were so distant. You didn't see her. I did. I saw her, Caleb, and I loved her. I've always loved her." I stared at him, the words landing like blows but not breaking me. Not anymore. I'd already been broken. Now I was something else, harder, colder, sharper. "You're dead to me," I said, voice quiet but final, a hammer dropping on the last nail. "You were dead to me the second you touched her. This is just the funeral. I turned on my heel and walked out the door, creaking behind me, the cold desert air hitting my face like a slap. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. Ethan Whitaker wasn't my brother anymore. He was a stranger with my blood, a man I'd once trusted, and that trust had been burned to the ground. All that was left now was ash and the fire still burning in my chest. And that fire had a name: justice. They say patience is a virtue, but for me, it became a weapon. The kind you sharpen in the dark, waiting for just the right moment to strike. And in the weeks that followed, that confrontation at the rusted spur, that's exactly what I did. I watched. I waited. And I let Samantha dig her own grave, one text, one lie, one smug little smile at a time. She thought she was clever. Thought I was just the same old Caleb. Steady, reliable, the man who would hold the door open, kiss her forehead, good night, and look the other way when things didn't add up. But the truth is I had stopped being that man the day I held that DNA test in my hands. That man was dead and buried. What was left was someone colder, someone willing to play the long game. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table sipping coffee, watching Samantha scroll through her phone like it held the secrets of the universe. Lily was in the living room babbling at a stuffed giraffe, and for a moment, just a moment, I felt that familiar tug in my chest, the one that whispered, "She's still your little girl, no matter what the papers say." But I pushed it down, hardened my heart like steel, because love without truth is just a trap, and I wasn't about to get caught again. Samantha looked up, catching me watching her, and gave me a smile so bright it could have lit up the whole damn house. "What's on your mind, honey?" Her voice was syrupy sweet, the kind she used when she was working an angle. I'd heard it enough times in her videos. "Manifest abundance, ladies. The universe gives what you're ready to receive." All of it just a polished act for her followers and me. I'd been her longest running mark. "Just thinking about us," I said, keeping my tone light, casual. Like I was the same old Caleb she thought she had wrapped around her finger. "Oh," she asked, leaning in, eyes wide and expectant. "Thinking good thoughts." I hope I nodded. Even smiled a little. I was thinking, maybe we should talk about a fresh start. Counseling, maybe some time apart to work on ourselves. I want to do what's best for Lily. Her eyes lit up, but not with the warmth of a wife grateful for a second chance. No, this was greed, calculation. The flash of a predator who thinks the trap's already sprung. "That's really mature of you, Caleb," she said, her voice softening into that wounded, fragile tone she used when she wanted to sound noble. "I've been thinking the same thing. I think some space would be good for us." I sipped my coffee and kept my face neutral, but inside I was seething. She was playing me still, and she had no idea I was already 5 steps ahead. I worry about Lily," I said, letting the sentence hang. Samantha reached across the table, her hand resting on mine, a touch so light it might have been a trick of the air. Maybe it's time to think about what's best for her too." There it was, the opening I'd been waiting for. I let my eyebrows lift just a little, like I was confused but interested. "What do you mean?" She bit her lip, her eyes darting away and back, classic tell when she was about to feed me a lie. "Well, I mean, if the test results are accurate, and I'm not saying they are, of course, but if they are, then maybe Lily deserves to know her real father. Maybe we should let Ethan have a chance to be part of her life." I stared at her stone-faced, but my heart was thundering so loud I could barely hear her. The audacity, the pure, shameless audacity. This wasn't about what was best for Lily. This was Samantha laying the groundwork to dump Lily on Ethan when it suited her. The child she had used as a pawn in her sick little power game was now a burden she was looking to offload. "I just want what's best for everyone," she added, voice soft practiced. "Don't you?" I let out a slow breath like I was considering it. "Of course, if it's really what's best for Lily." Samantha smiled, then a tight, gleaming grin, the kind you give when you think you've won. I reached for her hand, squeezed it gently, and nodded. Inside, I wanted to tear the house down. Later that night, after she went to bed, I sat in the workshop, the faint glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the sawdust-strewn floor. The recording device in my pocket hummed quietly. Every word she'd said, every lie, every manipulation, every plan was safe, stored, and ready for court. Arizona was a one-party consent state. She had no idea I'd been recording her for weeks. I scrolled through my files, audio files, text threads, bank statements. Grace had pulled screenshots of Samantha's secret Instagram DMs, the $40,000 she thought I hadn't noticed moving into Ethan's account. The noose was tightening, and she didn't even know she had a rope around her neck. The next day, I sent a quick message to Grace. "Got everything. We're good to go. Let me know when we file." Her reply came back within the hour. "Copy that. Almost ready. Let her keep talking. The more she digs, the deeper the hole. I smiled at that, a cold, hard smile. Samantha thought she was playing me, but I had news for her. I'd learned to play the game better. And the reckoning was just getting started. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but in my case, it was served at the same reclaimed oak table where my life had fallen apart. This time, though, I wasn't the man who sat quietly cutting steak while the world burned around him. No, this time I was the one holding the match. It was a Saturday night, clear skies over Flagstaff, the air humming with that electric stillness right before a storm. Samantha flitted around the kitchen, setting plates, adjusting napkins, her hands shaking just enough to give her away. She tried to act casual, tried to hum some pop song under her breath, but the pitch was off, the smile brittle. She knew something was coming, she just didn't know what. The guest list was the same Jolene, her sharp tongue dulled by too many bad decisions and too much cheap wine. Elaine sitting like a queen on her crumbling throne spine, ramrod straight, eyes darting everywhere but at me. Ethan looking like a man who'd lost a bar fight with his conscience, haggard, pale hollow. And Samantha, my beautiful, manipulative wife, sitting at the head of the table with her perfect hair, her perfect smile, and a lie coiled in every word she spoke. I let them settle in, let the conversation start slow. Talk of weather, local politics, some joke about the Diamondbacks. I let them think this was just another awkward attempt at family civility. Then I laid the folders on the table. 8 of them, thick and neat, tied with string. One for each of them. I could feel the air shift the moment they saw them, like the barometric pressure dropping before the sky splits open. "What's this?" Jolene asked, voice slurring, just a little trying for casual and failing. "Truth," I said, my voice low, calm. I didn't have to raise it. The weight of the room did the work for me. Samantha's fingers hovered over her folder, like it might bite her. Ethan stared at his like it might explode. Elaine's hand twitched toward hers, then stopped, as if afraid of what it might contain. I gestured slow and deliberate. "Go on, open them." For a beat, no one moved. Then, like dominoes falling, they began. Jolene's face went pale as she scanned screenshots of her podcast transcripts, snide comments about me, about Lily, about Samantha's business ventures. Photos of her laughing over drinks with Samantha while I worked late in the shop. Posts where she mocked me as a clueless woodworker, husband, the good gullible guy. Elaine's folder was thinner but no less damning. Bank records, payment receipts, emails between her and Samantha discussing the transfer and keeping Caleb in the dark. "Mom!" I heard Samantha's voice, small, strangled, as she glanced at Elaine. Elaine's lip trembled, but she said nothing. Not a damn word. Ethan's folder was a brick. Bank statements, wire transfers, screenshots of texts between him and Samantha, late-night plans, whispered fantasies, the occasional "I love you." Photos from the cheap hotel off Route 66, time-stamped clear as day. His hand on her back, her lips on his neck. My life in ruins laid out in ink and paper. Ethan looked at me, his mouth opening, but I raised a hand silencing him. No words now, no excuses. And then there was Samantha's folder, the crown jewel. I waited until she picked it up, until her perfectly manicured hands opened the cover and her eyes scanned the first page. The color drained from her face, a slow, creeping white that spread like frostbite. Inside were records of every dollar she'd funneled out of our accounts, vacation funds, Lily's college savings, my emergency stash. Emails she'd sent to Ethan about splitting the money once the divorce is final. Screenshots of her DMing a business partner about buying a condo in Sedona once she got the settlement from the idiot husband. And the recordings. My God, the recordings. I pulled out my phone, placed it on the table, and hit play. Her voice filled the room clear and crisp, thanks to the recorder I'd hidden under the kitchen table. "Caleb's so desperate to save the marriage, he'll believe anything I tell him," she laughed. "I just need to keep him happy for a few more months while I move the rest of the money. Then I'll file for divorce and claim he was controlling and abusive. Courts always side with the mother." Elaine gasped. Jolene's mouth hung open. Ethan buried his face in his hands. I paused the recording. The silence was suffocating. Samantha finally found her voice brittle and high-pitched. I can explain." I cut her off, my voice low and steady like a hammer dropping. "You've been explaining for 2 years. I'm done listening." The doorbell rang right on cue. I gestured toward the entryway where a process server stood holding a thick envelope. "Divorce papers," I said, nodding toward Samantha. "You're officially served." She looked like I'd punched her. Jolene let out a low, shocked whistle. Elaine pressed a shaking hand to her chest. Ethan sat frozen like a man who'd seen his own grave. "On." Samantha lunged across the table, shoving the folders aside, screaming, You can't do this to me. You think you're so smart, Caleb? But you're just a small town nobody. You were lucky to have me, lucky. I stood slow and deliberate, and when I spoke, my voice was steel. No, Samantha, I was a fool to trust you. And now I'm a man who's taking his life back. Her scream echoed through the house as I turned and walked out, leaving my table scattered with the wreckage of their lies. The reckoning had arrived, and I wasn't done yet. The courtroom smelled like old wood and cold coffee, sterile quiet at the kind of place where lives are cut apart with words and evidence. I sat at the plaintiff's table in a dark suit that still felt too tight across the shoulders, hands folded on the table in front of me, back straight, chin up. This wasn't a day for slouching. This was a day for war. Across the aisle, Samantha sat rigid, her hair pulled back so tight it looked like it might snap. Her face was pale lips painted too bright, a mask of wounded innocence that would have fooled anyone who didn't know better. She kept glancing at her attorney, a young public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, his tie askew, a nervous twitch in his jaw. Samantha's hands trembled in her lap. She tried to meet my gaze, but I didn't give her that. Ethan wasn't there. He'd skipped town 2 days earlier, sold the rusted spur for pennies, and disappeared. Coward. My attorney, Grace Sullivan, sat next to me, a fortress of quiet confidence. She had a neat stack of files in front of her, evidence timelines, bank records, recordings. She didn't look at me much, just gave a small nod. Every time we locked eyes, like to say, I've got you. We're ready. The judge, an older man named Judge Reyes, entered his robe flapping like a bird's wings as he settled behind the bench. His gaze swept over the room, sharp and no nonsense. Let's proceed, he said. Samantha's attorney started with the sob story, how she was a devoted wife, a loving mother, a woman who'd been neglected by her workaholic husband, how I'd emotionally abandoned her after my back injury, how she'd been left to manage the household, the baby, the bills all on her own. He tried to paint me as controlling, distant, cold. He even hinted at emotional abuse, though the word alleged hung in the air like a bitter aftertaste. I let him talk, let the lies pile up like dry kindling, because I knew what was coming. When it was Grace's turn, she stood slowly unfolding a single sheet of paper like she was handling dynamite. Her voice was steady, controlled, but there was an edge to it like the quiet before a storm. Your Honor, she began, we intend to demonstrate not only a pattern of infidelity by the defendant, Samantha Whitaker, but also systematic financial fraud, parental manipulation, and perjury. Samantha's head snapped toward her lawyer. He stammered something, but Grace silenced him with a raised hand and continued. She started with the bank records, line after line of transactions, thousands funneled from our joint accounts into an account under Ethan's name. The judge's eyebrows inched higher with each page. Then came the emails, the text threads, the screenshots. Samantha's voice filled the room as Grace played the recordings. I just need to keep him happy for a few more months while I move the rest of the money. The courts always side with the mother. I'll claim he was abusive. It'll be my word against his. Each word was a nail in her coffin. Samantha shifted in her seat, her mask cracking, her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. She tried to interrupt, but the judge held up a hand. Let her finish. Then Grace dropped the bombshell evidence that Samantha had hidden assets, jewelry sold under the table, a secret account in Sedona cash deposits she never reported. Fraud. Clear, deliberate fraud. The judge's face darkened. He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. Mrs. Whitaker, do you have anything to say in your defense? Samantha's voice broke a thin, desperate thing. I made mistakes. I was scared. I didn't want to lose my daughter. Grace spoke up, her voice like a blade. You mean the daughter you were prepared to abandon, the one you called a problem in your own words? Samantha's face crumbled. Tears spilled over, but I felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, just cold, clean clarity. The judge's gavel hit the desk like thunder. Enough. His ruling came swift and sharp. Full legal and physical custody of Lily to me. Supervised visitation for Samantha contingent on completing a full psychological evaluation and parenting classes. No spousal support. No claim to the house. Restitution for the funds she stole. And a formal referral to the district attorney's office for investigation of fraud and perjury. Samantha gasped, her face a mask of horror, but the courtroom was already moving on papers. Shuffled chairs scraped back, the machinery of justice grinding on. I stood, my legs steady, my breath slow. Grace packed up our files, her hands sure and calm. You did it, she said quietly, almost like an afterthought. Nah, I said, looking across the courtroom at Samantha's crumpled figure, at the wreckage of everything we'd built. She did it. I just made sure everyone saw it. As we walked out into the Arizona sun, I felt the heat on my face, the weight lifting off my shoulders, and I realized something: I hadn't just survived the fire. I'd walked through it, and I wasn't burned. 6 months later, I stood in my workshop sanding the final edge of a custom dining table, a thick slab of black walnut with natural live edges, the kind of piece that would outlive me. The sun streamed in through the big windows, catching the sawdust in the air and turning it to gold. The smell of varnish and wood shavings clung to the walls, the scent of honest work. The shop looked different now. I'd repainted the old sign out front, true grain woodworking, strength through scars. The name wasn't just a slogan, it was a declaration. Every board I cut, every joint I fitted, every groove I carved told a story not just of craftsmanship, but of survival. Of a man who'd been broken down and chose to rebuild stronger, smarter, sharper. Lily's giggle echoed in my mind, but not from my house. She was thriving in a foster home with a family I'd carefully vetted, good people, salt-of-the-earth folks with big hearts and steady hands. I saw her every week, sat with her on the porch while she babbled about colors and animals, read her books until she drifted off on my shoulder. She wasn't mine by blood, but I loved her enough to make sure she never had to feel the fallout of her mother's lies. I couldn't give her everything, but I could give her safety, stability, a clean slate, and that was enough. Samantha. She was gone. Moved to Phoenix, I heard, tried to restart her influencer career, but the scandal followed her like a bad tattoo. Her follower count plummeted. Sponsors dropped her like a hot rock. Last I heard, she was living in a cheap apartment, trying to spin her story as some kind of victim narrative, but no one was buying it. Karma's funny like that. Ethan never came back. The rusted spurs sat boarded up on the edge of town, a rusting reminder of what happens when you sell your soul for a few stolen moments. Part of me wondered if he'd show up one day, tail between his legs, looking for forgiveness. But I knew if he did, I'd look him in the eye and tell him the truth: family is earned, not given. And he'd lost the right to call himself my brother the day he betrayed me. Jolene's podcast tanked. Turns out people don't like hearing about your sister's dirty laundry when you're the one who helped air it. Elaine, she kept her distance, probably nursing her pride in whatever little corner she had left. Let her. None of them mattered to me anymore. The people who did matter, Grace, Tommy, and a few loyal clients, stood by me. Grace especially. She was a quiet presence, steady and sharp, the kind of woman who didn't need to fill the silence to make it meaningful. She'd stop by the shop some afternoons just to talk, or sit across from me with coffee and her laptop working while I sanded down wood. No rush, no pressure, just companionship. And I realized I didn't need fireworks to rebuild a life. I needed trust, honesty. A woman who didn't flinch when things got messy. Grace wasn't a spark. She was a slow burn. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to run from that. I wiped the last bit of sawdust from the table, stepped back, and looked at the grain, deep, rich, full of scars and imperfections that only made it more beautiful. Like me, I guess. My phone buzzed on the bench, Grace's name on the screen. Lunch tomorrow, found a new place downtown. Decent coffee for once. I smiled. I'll be there. I took a long breath and stepped outside into the Arizona sun, the scent of pine and dry earth filling my lungs. The world felt bigger somehow, like the weight I'd carried for years had finally been set down. The sky stretched wide and blue above me, and the road ahead wasn't paved with bitterness or regret. It was mine to build. Some people break when they're betrayed. Others pick up the pieces, sand down the rough edges, and build something stronger. I chose to build, and I wasn't done yet.